Hello and welcome to this series of business application development videos. Today we will get started with C# and Visual Studio. We will go over an introduction of the Visual Studio environment. We will talk a little bit about the .NET framework. We'll also look at the structure of solution files and the content of some CS files. All right, so let's get started. So assuming that you have downloaded and installed the Microsoft Visual Studio Express for Windows, we're going to go ahead and create a new C# project. So we'll go to File, New Project, and then we'll select Visual Studio C#. And see here that we have multiple options. For now, we will focus on the Windows Forms application. All right, so we'll create our new project and make sure that you look at the path or the location of your project and see where that project will be saved. So now that our project has been created, we see that we have several windows. We have the Solution Explorer window, we have the Properties window, we have the Toolbox window, and then we have our Designer window right here. Okay, so let's focus a little bit on the Solution Explorer for now. Under the Solution Explorer, we see that we have a solution, and then we have what we call Windows Forms Application 1, and that would be our project. So note here that you can have several projects under the same solution. So let's go ahead and try that. So we can add a different project to the same solution. So if we're building a huge system, then it would make sense to have several projects under the same solution. And note here that we can have different types of projects under the same solution. For now, we'll just select one and see here that we have two different projects under the same solution. Also note that the environment has created several files for us by default. Okay? So we have our main file is the form1.cs, and this is the one that describes this form right here. And also we have the program.cs. And program.cs is the file that contains the code that starts our project. So this is the code that gets executed first. Okay, this is our startup code. Okay. Now, if we go back to our form, we see here that we have a properties window. So we have some properties that are related to this form that we can change. And we're going to go over this in more detail. And we're going to look at the different properties about the form and what we can change about it, etc. Okay. On this other side, we have a toolbox, and the toolbox provides different controls that we could. We have a button, we have checkbox, etc. And these controls are provided by the .NET framework, and that's what makes C# very interesting. Is that we have some code that's embedded into the .NET that provides some tools for us. So instead of using the command line, for example, so for example, if you were coding in C, you would have to use a basic console to interact with your program. You have a graphical user interface. You have this window where you can add in buttons and checkboxes and etc. So .NET helps you with that, and it's a lot more convenient to have all of these controls already built in for you and all of that code already written for you. Okay? Now, if we double click on the form, we go back to the form.cs, and this shows the code that goes behind that form, okay, so in the background. And see here, we have three different sections. This first section describes the namespaces that are included in the .NET framework. So this code is automatically generated by the .NET, and this is what you're using from the .NET framework to use all of those controls, all of those buttons, etc. Okay, so that is the code that's embedded for you. That's something that you don't have to write. You're just telling the program that you are using these namespaces. Okay, and here you have your own namespace. So this is for your own project, and under that you have what we call a class. So you have a namespace, and then underneath the namespace or inside the namespace container, you have a class. And then inside the class, you're going to have different methods. And when we say methods, these are functions that you're going to write, and this is where your code is going to be. Okay? So again, in our solution, we can have several projects, and each project we have a program.cs file that contains our startup code, or that's the code that executes first and gets executed first when we start up our project. We also have a form that's automatically generated, and in the background we have this code that's running, and within that code we have the namespaces that are provided by the .NET framework, and we have our own code, and this is where our own code will go. So we have our own namespace, under which we have a class, and then inside that class we'll have our different methods. Okay, so here, just going over a few options. There's an auto hide option. You can have these files just hide like that. If you want to focus on the code and writing your code, and you want to hide all the other windows, you can do that. You can switch between different files. So instead of looking at the code, if you want to modify the design, you can go back to the design. But basically, these are the most important files. And also what you can do, you can have your windows either float or dock. When I say float, your window can float anywhere in within your screen. Okay? Instead of having it attached to the side of the screen. Okay? You can also right-click and make it dock again. Okay? So you can pin your windows. So that way you would be able to see all of your windows. And see here how we have our toolbox that was pinned to the bottom of the screen. Let's get it back where it was, to the left of the screen. Okay, so these are just a few options just to get yourself familiar with the environment, with the Visual Studio environment. The things to remember here is that using C#, you're including the .NET framework, which includes tons of functionalities that are pre-written for you or included for you that would help a lot with your graphical user interface. However, it is important to know that when you create a project using C#, it would only work on Windows machines. So those are machines that use the Windows operating system. One last thing that we want to include in this video is going over the toolbar. Right here, you have a toolbar very similar to the one you can find on Microsoft Word or Excel. So you have a file, edit, view, etc. You also have a start button. So once you write your application, you want to debug it, you want to start it, this is where you go. All right. So now, if we do exit out of our solution, right here, let's go to our projects file and see how our project looks like. So we said that our projects will be saved by default under Visual Studio 2013 projects. So this is our project. So right here we see that we have one solution and we have two different projects in here. We open either button, or we can go to File, Open File, and then under Projects, we can open our solution. So now we're back to our default view where we can see the toolbox, our form designer, our solution explorer, and our properties window. Okay, so I hope this has been helpful, and see you in the next video.